Hello, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for joining us on today's webinar, Allyship, Peer Networks and Social Learning for Building an Inclusive Workplace. My name is Melissa, and I will be kicking things off for us today. I would like to extend a thank you to NovoEd for sponsoring today's webinar. Founded at Stanford's Social Algorithm Lab in 2012, NovoEd is a capability building platform that combines social and collaborative learning to drive true performance readiness at scale. Through cohort-based experiences centered around real human interaction, NovoEd taps into collective wisdom, placing each learner at the intersection of perspective, application, and expertise. Large enterprises such as 3M, GE, and Nestle partner with NovoEd to accelerate their critical initiatives, reconnect teams, and achieve rapid alignment through learning that is deeply felt and experienced and swiftly transformed into impact. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with Brandon Hall Group, we are a research and analyst firm that empowers excellence in organizations around the world through our research and tools. A quick mention that we currently have several certification programs open for enrollment, including our Certified Learning Strategist program. You can visit certification.brandonhall.com for more information. Now let's quickly go through some logistics. To ask questions, please use the question box on your control panel. Today's presentation is being recorded, and we will share a link to the recording and a PDF of the presentation via email in roughly 24 hours. If you would like to download a copy of today's presentation instantly, you may do so by clicking the link that will be available in the chat momentarily. And the chat is open for everyone, so we invite you to participate and comment throughout the discussion, or simply pop in to say hello and let us know where you're joining in from today. Our analyst and moderator for today's discussion is Claude Werder, who is the SVP and Principal HCM Analyst here at Brandon Hall Group. Claude runs Brandon Hall Group's talent management, leadership development, and diversity, equity, and inclusion practices, focusing on solving corporates' challenges in developing and retaining talent. He takes a strategic, unified approach with a keen eye on leveraging technology to drive efficiencies that enable leaders to better engage employees and drive performance. And without any further delay, I will turn things over to Claude so we can dive right in.
Well, thank you, Melissa, and welcome everyone. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day to join us. We think this is a really important topic and want to thank NovoEd again for sponsoring. I'm going to take just a few minutes today to frame our conversation around allyship based on Brandon Hall Group's ongoing research on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Then I'm going to introduce our experts, Dr. Kristen Lee, Amberly Santana, and Juan Moran of NovoEd, who will analyze the current allyship landscape, describe allyship with Dr. Lee's organization Next Up. Kristen and Amber will share with you the partnership and that Next Up and NovoEd have, and Juan will give you a short demonstration of the NovoEd platform. So let's dig right in, starting with some of the research. When anyone in HR is asked about an organization's top priorities, diversity, equity, inclusion, DE&I, is at the very top of the list. In fact, 98% of organizations responding to our research in 2022 rated it as an important or critical business strategy. In addition, 90% of organizations prioritize creating the right organizational culture and driving innovation, both of which are directly related to DE&I. Unfortunately, importance does not always translate to a cohesive strategy or the desired business results, which in this case is an inclusive culture where people from all backgrounds are represented and have a sense of belonging to the organization. When that occurs, business results such as talent retention, productivity, revenue, and much more go up. And that's according to our research and several other studies. Most employers have taken a scattershot approach to DE&I rather than a strategic one. Learning initiatives are important, but they've dominated most efforts. And unless it's an immersive social learning that we're going to be talking about today, it talks about and teaches what's important and why, but not always transforming that knowledge into action and making DE&I part of the default culture of work. That requires advocacy and influence that few organizations have been able to generate. So our research shows as this graphic shows, that just 45% of organizations have an organization-wide strategic plan. On the positive side, another 31% are actively working to develop one. So progress is being made, but most organizations are still toward the beginning of their journey. Now, on the next slide, even if you have a strategic plan, that in itself is not enough, because you can see here, most strategic efforts don't go deep enough. 85% of organizations focus on communicating the DE&I mission, values, and principles. A strong majority also work toward creating an understanding of the business need for DE&I and establishing governance, some level of accountability. This is a great foundation, but again, cannot on their own drive the kind of culture change and business impact their organizations seek. So after more than 2 years of intense focus on DEI in organizations across the globe, business impact has really been relatively modest, according to our research. You can see from this graphic, less than half of organizations are to a point where individuals treat different ideas and opinions with respect, which is a basic foundation for an inclusive culture. And if you look toward the bottom of the slide, you'll see that only 1/4 of organizations say the diversity of the leadership team is more reflective of the composition of the workforce than it had been. Only 19% say pay and benefits have improved. So you can't have a truly inclusive culture without those things, and most organizations just aren't there yet. Inclusive culture requires, as I said, the buy-in, the active involvement by people with influence, and advocacy across the enterprise. Moving on to the next slide. That's not an easy thing. True inclusion requires everyone, and especially people who are in positions of authority and influence, to demonstrate the principles of DE&I and advocate for and support people from traditionally underrepresented groups. Allyship is this type of activism on behalf of people traditionally excluded in organizations. It's critically important. But as our research shows on this slide, only 28% of organizations so far have been able to build a network of allies. So that's why we're dedicating this webinar today to discuss allyship and peer networks and social learning needed to build this inclusive workplace. And before I introduce our featured presenters, let's define allyship a little bit further for those who might not be fully familiar with it. Allies can be anyone in the organization. They don't have to be leaders, who recognize that certain groups face barriers to advancement that have nothing to do with their abilities as people or professionals. Allies do what they can to remove these barriers and promote people's positive accomplishments. Allies can be of any gender or race, but they're especially effective when they are members of the dominant group in power. These allies utilize their credibility to create a workplace where everyone can thrive. So put another way, as shown on the slide, an ally is any person who actively promotes and aspires to advance the culture of inclusion through intentional, positive, conscious efforts to benefit people as a whole. Also, allies advocate for members of social groups outside their own, specifically those that face discrimination or are underrepresented. And allies typically belong to a more widely represented group, but work to help others facing different challenges to succeed in various ways. So here are a few examples. A white male executive can be an ally to women of color who want to reach the same position in their careers. Or a cisgender employee can be an ally to colleagues from the LGBTQIA+ community. Another example is people from privileged backgrounds who are allies to those who lack the same economic stability and opportunities. So what we want to do is talk more about allyship, provide insights so it can thrive and have impact in your organization. We'll spend the remainder of our time together talking about how to build networks of allyship in the workplace, featuring Dr. Kristen Lee and Amber Leach Santana and Juan Moran. So first, Dr. Lee is a virtual learning manager at Next Up, an organization committed to advancing all women growing business and transforming our workplaces through the power of the community. Kristen holds a Doctor of Education degree in Global Training and Development, as well as a master's degree in counseling. She specializes in translating business outcomes to build a value-based culture. She specializes in training these outcomes and to build a value-based culture, and she's passionate about allyship and as an expert on it. She's joined by Amberly Santana, a senior learning experience designer for our webinar sponsor, NovoEd. Amberly's diverse background informs the way she currently develops courses on leadership and diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging for clients across many industries. Amberly has spent nearly a decade teaching, designing curriculum, developing training programs for learners in higher education and for corporate clients. And Juan Moran is the Senior Solutions Consultant for NovoEd, who's going to provide our platform demonstration. All of these folks have great perspective to share. And so now I'll turn it over to Kristen to get us started.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Are you all able to hear me okay? Awesome. It is such a pleasure to be before you all today. As mentioned, my name is Dr. Kristen Lee, and I'm the Virtual Learning Manager at NextUp. For those of you that may not be familiar with NextUp, we are formerly known as Network or I'm sorry, our formal name was Network of Executive Women, or NEW for short, but we're a nonprofit organization and our mission is to advance all women in business. Just this past year, we celebrated 20 years of listening, supporting, and partnering with our community of 16,000 plus members, our 300 plus regional sponsors and corporate partners. And over the years, we've continued to show our commitment to be inclusive, to be bold with our voice and our actions, and to be relevant. And our ultimate goal is to transform our workplaces. And so we're able to do that by developing learning experiences and business solutions for our corporate partners. Each year, we host 2 national conferences, in addition to the learning experiences and networking events that we host throughout our 21 regional communities. Next slide, please. Let's take a look at the current landscape of allyship in the workplace. Now, for me, I personally believe that the workforce as we knew it before the pandemic is long gone, and like we're never going back there, right? And so, although a lot of organizations were already doing some work to try to understand and transform their workplace and the culture for their employees, a lot of them also had strategies and initiatives in place to address things like DEI, retention, to increase the number of women in their leadership roles, and also to continue driving innovation. All of that was previously stated, right? I think also with the murder of George Floyd, it heightened this sense of urgency around making DEI a priority across not just HR, but across the business, or to at least be curious about next steps. Next slide, please. You know, in our Beyond the Allies program, we have this saying that data drives business decisions, but it's what you do that drives change and impact. I want to be honest with you all that even as an organization that supports the advancement of women in business and their allies, we didn't have all the answers. Just like many of our corporate partners, we too were challenged to pivot and think about how we were doing things and to look at the data from a different view. Just like many of you all, we also saw the alarming data about the number of women that were leaving the workforce and that weren't returning. And so that's when I started to really get curious about this idea of addressing retention with allyship as a business solution. When we look at the reasons why women were leaving, it was due to better pay because of the lack of empathy that they received from their leaders. And it was also due to a toxic workplace culture. Next slide, please. And so in being this curious explorer, I started to take this deeper dive into the research and what the data was saying to kind of make this stronger business case that fostering allyship could in fact help solve for two things. It could help solve for retention and to help build an inclusive culture. The research also indicates that there is in fact this correlation between the reasons why women were leaving their employer and also the impact of the actions that their leaders were taking to support their teams. It's also favorable for the business and employee outcomes to have women in leadership. Now, we oftentimes get asked, well, why are we still talking about this? There are more women in leadership roles and sitting on boards today than ever before in our history. And although that is true, men still outnumber women in leadership. And to be quite honest with you all, until all leaders can share in this responsibility that the challenges that are around retention or to fully commit to advancing DEI within their organization and not to just view it as this HR problem, will we be able to make the necessary gains to scale an effective solution like allyship across the business. Next slide, please. And so we like to listen to our corporate partners and our members. And so we heard from several of them that they were looking to do a couple things. They were looking to, one, actively engage the male allies within their organization. They were also looking to increase the awareness around the challenges and barriers that women were facing in the workplace. And they were also looking to promote an inclusive culture. And so next slide, please. And so when we think about allyship training in this traditional sense, it's approached the same way as any other corporate DEI training. It's very prescriptive and low stakes. And these trainings often, there are some additional things on this slide, if you're able to, there you go. Thank you. These trainings often happen inside of an organization, which makes it sometimes difficult for participants to feel comfortable or to be open and transparent about not just where they are in their journey, but it's uncomfortable sometimes for them to share their personal experiences in fear that they're going to be judged by their peers. Also, participants end up feeling overwhelmed because there's a lot of information that are they're overloaded with too much information sometimes in these sessions because they're short and they tend to not go in great detail. And so even though there may be even some engagement with the discussions and participants might even walk away with some aha moments, oftentimes these methods are short-lived and they don't translate to action or change behavior beyond the training. Next slide, please. And so at Next Up, we saw where the gaps were in other allyship trainings. We also looked at the advantages that we had with our corporate partnerships and our broader Next Up community. We also had our commitment to the women that we serve to help transform their workplaces. And so we really saw this opportunity for us to focus on the impact of emotional intelligence at work. And so at Next Up, we have a few different allyship solutions. We have a workshop series that is designed for the general population to help organizations kind of scale within their organization. And then we have the custom allyship programming. And the program that we'll talk about today is our in-depth leadership development program called Beyond Allies. And it's an experience that is designed for leaders who manage people. Next slide, please. And so our program Beyond Allies, it targets males, but it's really open to anyone who has a desire to be an ally to women. What I love about our cohort is that it's diverse across all dimensions. Participants are represented of different organizations. And even though we designed this program or this experience for leaders of people, the participants range anywhere from individual contributors to our senior leaders. We like to make sure that our program, that the participants are able to retain the information. And so we pace out our information over a 3-month period, but we also make sure that the information is broken down in bite sizes so that it's digestible for the participants. We also promote self-awareness and action. And so we make sure that we also include a 1-year membership to Next Up so that we can encourage the participants to foster community, to also be visible and active in supporting the women in their workplaces or in their lives, and to also position themselves to continue their engagement and their learning journey in one of our regions. Next slide, please. And so the foundation of our Beyond Allies program is emotional intelligence. I think that in order to truly transform a culture, you have to first transform the heart and the minds of the people. And so learning the facts alone isn't going to be enough to promote a change behavior. And so we have our leaders start their learning journey by taking the emotional intelligence assessment, where each of them receives a custom report along with expert coaching from an emotional intelligence coach. And so I think there's such this power in being self-aware and also being aware of how your actions and your emotions impact the lives of others. And so those are some of the things that we focus on. When you look at the competency areas for emotional intelligence, they all tie back to characteristics of being a good leader and being an effective ally. We also cover 5 digital modules, and we make sure that we go into great depth on the topics. Also, again, ensuring that the information is broken down so that it's digestible for the learner. And then we get together on a bi-weekly cadence to engage in some meaningful peer discussion around the topic for that particular week. We also build this community of trust and accountability and this support for one another in our program. And in addition to that, the participants walk away with learning and practicing real-time practical tools and strategies that are prescribed, but they are authentic to them. And so those are some of the things that we focus on in our program. Next slide, please. And so we ran a few pilots of our Beyond Allies program, and we had reached this point to where the demand just was out of our hands. And so we were really looking to find this solution that could help us scale our impact. I researched and demoed quite a few technology platforms, and for me, they were either too academic or they lacked the community aspect, which was really important to us. It was also important that we didn't lose the integrity of our program or the participant experience. And so I came across NovoEd, and when I demoed the platform, it checked all the boxes for me. It was the one solution that allowed me to really unify the experience, not just for myself on the back end, but also for our end users. In the platform, I was able to run all aspects from the live events, the on-demand learning, the networking and collaboration spaces, the custom reporting, and also I was able to conduct our impact survey. And so all of the boxes were checked for me. I'll also say this, and I promise you that NovoEd did not pay me to say this, but I've really enjoyed our partnership with them. They have really become vested in our program. Whenever there are new features that roll out, the team will message me and say, hey, this week we got this new feature, and here's how we think it'll help to enhance the participant experience for your program. And so I absolutely love that they've become a thought partner for us in our program. And so in just a couple of weeks, we'll be running our 4th program of Beyond Allies in the NovoEd platform. Next slide, please. And so at this point, I would like to turn it over to Amberly, who will talk about our Beyond Allies program in the NovoEd platform.
Thank you, Dr. Lee. Again, I'm Amberly Santana, and I work for NovoEd, a learning technology company that partners with organizations like Next Up to create transformational learning experiences. And I actually had the privilege of working with Dr. Lee and building out the Beyond Allies program, which we'll talk about today. I'm thrilled to be speaking with you all about some of the thinking behind the design decisions we make as instructional designers when creating inclusion trainings, as well as show you our platform in action. Next slide, thank you. So if you've designed allyship training or inclusion training before, you know that it can be a little different. It's unique. It can be different from your standard, say, sales enablement training or technical training. And I've listed 4 reasons here why that's the case. I'd like to first go into the fact that with inclusion training, we're aiming to build a capability, not a skill. It's a deep competency that requires a variety of skills across lots of strength areas and requires practicing and applying those skills over time. And so for that reason, it's beneficial to have a sophisticated technology that enables us to facilitate that deep learning. Secondly, it can be a little bit political. If you all have run trainings like this, you know that it can be controversial and that there's not always universal buy-in. There's not always universal support for the value that this training can bring. So if you imagine a large organization with hundreds of members, you're bound to have a variety of opinions, colliding perspectives on the importance of this training and what value it can bring to their team or to the organization. And so for this reason, we have to prioritize building trust with our learners. Thirdly, it is a very personal topic. Oftentimes we're asking learners to be vulnerable and to access deep parts of themselves that maybe they don't want to or haven't before. We're asking them to be self-reflective and to look at their internal motivations and how that affects their behaviors. And that can make people feel a little bit uncomfortable. And for that reason, it's imperative that we foster a sense of psychological safety amongst our learners so that they can actually learn and feel valued and included. Lastly, I think it's important for us as instructional designers to be able to zoom out and think about our own biases and assumptions and how that informs the way we design our trainings. Ultimately, we know that this type of training affects everyone in an organization from the top to the bottom. And so when we're designing trainings like this, it's important that we think about the ways in which everyone could feel included so that when we finish the training, they leave feeling heard and valued because the last thing we would want is for our training on inclusion to have people feeling not included, right? So there's a way for us to facilitate that connection between learners that we'll talk about. So as a company, NovoEd has deeply held beliefs about how to create a digital learning environment that best enables people to learn. On the screen, you've got our 6 pillars that I would like to show you in action in our platform. And we'll pair that with the best practices we just talked about. So now let's head to the NovoEd platform and delve into the Beyond Allies program in particular to kind of see how they designed their program around the principles of building trust, fostering psychological safety, and encouraging connection. I'll turn it over to Juan to share their course. Thanks, Juan. So first, thinking about building trust, one thing that Next Up did really well is they started with this executive welcome. So they had Sarah, their CEO, record a video, and it's a very personal video you see there. It's nothing that's highly produced. And that set the tone for the entire course. It showed that this organization values this topic. It shows that it's valued at the highest levels. And it's a way to give a warm welcome to learners and make them feel like they're ready for this experience and everyone's excited for them to be there. Another way to build trust is to be certain to set norms and expectations for engagement. So Next Up has a series of virtual live sessions that they do throughout their training. And in each one, they list the rules of engagement very clearly on the screen. Be open, be kind, and most importantly, everything that's shared in these trainings is kept confidential. So that's a huge way to make people feel like they can be trusted to share how they really feel and feel empowered to be honest and open. In terms of psychological safety, one of the biggest things to foster this is to recognize and validate the very real trepidation that learners feel when entering courses like this. As Dr. Lee alluded to, a lot of times learners are nervous that they will say something wrong, that they may say something offensive. And in the Next Step, in the Beyond Allies program, they had a program welcome and EQ debrief. And so you see here in this session, part of the session was kind of setting the tone that there is room to make mistakes, that it's normal to be nervous about trainings like this. And not only do we want to allow there to be space to make mistakes, but we want to give you the tools to be able to reframe in the event that you ever do potentially say something offensive. Next, another way to do this is through networking groups or small accountability partner groups. And so if you have a course that's tens, hundreds of people, a group is a way to create a more intimate subset of learners where, again, they might feel a little bit more comfortable sharing their honest opinions, sharing what they're learning. It's a safe space to be honest and potentially share things that you might not want to share with the larger group, or you might not want in writing in a discussion forum, for example. And then lastly, thinking about connection, a really great way to do this that Beyond Allies implemented is with an introductory assignment. And so you'll see if you scroll down here, they did a video introductions challenge where they asked learners to share their name, what they do, and what brings them to Beyond Allies. And they chose a video recording because they know that that's the best way to make learners feel connected in a course and in an experience. And so, hi Juan. So this was a way for learners to see that there are humans behind the screen, humans in their cohort with them, journeying with them, and that creates a sense of inclusion for everyone. So now I'd like to turn it over to my colleague Juan to further demonstrate how NovoEd technology facilitates deep capability building through peer interaction, project work, and mentor connections.
And before Juan starts, just real quick, want to remind people that we're going to have time for questions at the end, and feel free to chat, bat some questions down in the Q&A piece at the bottom of your screen, and we'll get to them as soon as we're done with the presentation. Thanks, everybody.
All right, fantastic. And thank you, Claude. I'll provide you a deeper dive of the Beyond Allies experience and share with you a little bit more of what is it like, once you've gotten the stage set, you've been acclimated to the NovoEd platform, you've met your facilitators and your group members and potentially teammates to also work on projects and a variety of different assignments and engage in discussions as well. I'm on the homepage right now for the Beyond Allies learning program for leaders that's very DEI focused, as you've heard. And I'm logged in right now as a prospective ally named Darren. And Darren's part of this cohort-based time-bound social collaborative and very experiential learning program. It is blended in the sense that it's synchronous as well as asynchronous. You heard Dr. Lee talk about how she was able to bring her live sessions to life with the use of our Zoom integration. This is actually a nudge for Darren, my participant in the Beyond Allies program, letting him know that the first exchange in Zoom has already started, and he could just click that join now button to be able to join. So you can actually create your Zoom sessions. We also have the ability to track attendance in the Zoom sessions, and we can also import the Zoom session recordings and add it to the rest of the content that you can access within Beyond Allies in NovoEd. And we have a very similar integration with Microsoft Teams as well. Let me give you a little orientation to what you're seeing on the homepage here. Again, I'm logged in as Darren, here he is. And he's part of a cohort of peers. So he's with other leaders like himself to learn more about how to be a better ally and advance women in the workforce. There are a lot of male participants in this program, but as Dr. Lee was saying, the program is very open and inclusive. There are also women enrolled to also help advance allyship. This is a facilitated learning program, and most on NovoEd are. We do give you the ability to configure this to be a self-paced learning program, and it could even be bundled with other programs in order to create a learning journey as well, and it could be sequential. But really the differentiator for NovoEd is that we can help you replicate that in-person learning experience when you can bring people together, have them exchange feedback, have them get guidance from a facilitator like Dr. Lee and her team. In fact, right here, we're just highlighting discussions that Dr. Lee is facilitating around things like how to be a better leader through practicing empathy, for example. That's what this topic is covering. And basically enable people to learn together. We think that's gonna enable you to increase engagement and also provide the impact that you're hoping to gain from a program like this, where people get to discuss the content, engage in it directly by actually practicing using it and applying it, and being able to do that with their peers through teamwork, but also through experts. There are some mentors that are also enrolled in the program that are going to be assisting Dr. Lee in helping deliver the content and activities and providing feedback at a more expert level as well. Now, there are opportunities to engage in a lot of different types of small groups. So you saw a few minutes ago, Darren joined this One Team, One Dream group, for example. What I love about these two particular groups here is these are real examples. These are two male-initiated participant teams from Dr. Lee's Spring 2022 cohort for Beyond Allies. So a real team actually created a One Team, One Dream group, and another created a New Perspective group to just have a place to be able to visit and have conversations in that group workspace. Now, you can easily configure NovoEd to track these participants the way you want to. So what Dr. Lee chose to do is create some simple to-dos that can be tracked, right? There's also the ability to create assignments and define, you have to finish so many assignments out of the total possible. And if you want, you can even gamify this experience and add an additional dial for points, and you can enable a leaderboard. Sometimes that's an effective tool to motivate leaders, especially. We see it even more effective in sales enablement use cases at NovoEd. But you've seen a lot about how participants like Darren get started. They get to meet the people they're going to be working with. And what Dr. Lee has really developed is a wonderful framework where every week people engage in different topics like awareness and choice and motivation. And that framework would include engaging with content to build awareness around that topic, doing it together in a live Zoom session as well, having discussions that are asynchronous so people can participate whenever they like, and they could do it as a cohort, but also as teams in smaller groups. And then making sure that that learning is actionable. So every module ends with a wrap up with an action item, actually. So let me actually go in and show you a closer look at what we're talking about here. I'll get right into that first page in the awareness module. So in NovoEd, we allow you to create content in multiple ways. You can build it here. In fact, Dr. Lee and Amber Lee built most of this just using the native authoring tools within NovoEd. That's why you see like accordions, for example, images. Now, you also have the ability to upload content like the welcome video you saw earlier. You can also embed content. Here, for example, is a YouTube video featuring a Netflix episode of Explained. The episode focuses on why women are paid less and addressing the pay gap. The gender pay gap is one of the things that you get to engage in Beyond Allies. You can see there's a lot of additional content here, but what's really more important, I think, than the content is the ability to put that content into context. How does this apply to you, leader, who's participating in this program? How are you going to take this back and maybe start talking about it with your colleagues, your peers? And we actually give you the opportunity to do that practice. The very first activity we have here is a role play video practice exercise. We ask those leaders that are participating in the program to actually engage in a scenario where they have to facilitate a difficult conversation. Now, Darren already participated in this practice exercise. So that's why he already has a video recorded here, but you can see he can come again and keep practicing. He could review the prompt. So the prompts could be video or text or a combination of the two. And once you complete reviewing the prompt, then you have the ability to record your response, to that situation. Now, maybe it's about improving hiring practices to make them more inclusive, for example. Maybe that's a difficult conversation you have to practice having. Or maybe it's about how maybe someone's claiming there's bias in performance reviews, for example. Again, you have to practice having that conversation. So you could do that practice, but you can also learn collaboratively with others, and it could be social too. For example, here's another participant in the program, Rebecca. Darren can watch her video. He can learn from her and see what did she do. And he can also learn by sharing some feedback. This is all about engaging in deeper learning. That's what we want to enable you to do, to build these capabilities in NovoEd. But it can also be very collaborative. So Darren, as a participant, can also learn from the feedback that Rebecca's getting from others. Like Maxine, she provided some text-based feedback, and Jenna here provided a video feedback. And you can see there are actually timestamps to let the participants know, when does that feedback apply in the video? Was it at the beginning, in the middle, at the end? What second exactly does that apply to? So we enable you to be able to practice and build up the confidence, as well as get the feedback that you can utilize from your peers and others to keep getting better at doing this and make it easier. Now, there's also the opportunity to engage in those live sessions like we talked about. There's the ability to also do team discussions and assignments. Let me give you a closer look at what that looks like. So for example, as part of Dr. Lee's framework, she wants to always facilitate discussions, around these issues, and make sure people are keeping those discussions grounded, right? They're very reflective of what's actually happening in society, but also in their specific workplaces and personal lives. Now, they're going to give feedback in terms of having discussions by doing things like polls. This is a social poll, and this one we're asking people and reflecting on how our own awareness of biases. Which of the following describes your level of personal awareness, right? We made this social. But if you're asking questions that you think people might be uncomfortable sharing their responses to, you can make polls anonymous, so we can't see their names and faces, but we can at least collect that feedback in the data. How many people said they were not aware at all of their unconscious bias? We do go deeper into having those moments of reflection and contributing to conversations about them, because here's Dr. Lee again facilitating a team discussion, and she's asking, are there any strategies to overcome or control unconscious bias? She's providing some suggestions like active listening, actually purposely putting yourself in unfamiliar situations, like seeking out new experiences with diverse people. And here's Darren's group. There's Darren, there's his 3 teammates, including Rebecca. They're actually part of a team called Owner Mindset. This is one of Next Up's guiding values. They want to make sure people do things like own their mistakes, really spring into developing solutions, and are always seeking and giving constructive feedback. So these are the values that are really embedded in Beyond Allies. And you can see here, we're enabling people to have these conversations, make sure they they can apply them, to what they're doing as leaders and trying to be better and more inclusive leaders and learn that way, right? So they can have discussions, they can complete assignments. I'll show you in a moment what an assignment looks like for a team from the perspective of a mentor providing some feedback. And they can also complete their own individual assignments. So I mentioned we wrap up every single module every week with an action item. So this is where you're asked to now tell us, what are you going to do about it, right? So are you going to start developing a business case or a social case for raising awareness, maybe within your organization? Tell us about what your idea is. This is an assignment. It has a rubric. The participants know exactly how they're going to be evaluated when they are evaluated by the teaching team or mentors. And once Darren submits this assignment, he's going to have the opportunity to, or even before he submits, because you can configure when people see their peers' work, to see what other people said and be able to learn, from their action items as well. Now, that's a little bit of what the Beyond Allies experience is like as a leader engaging in the program as a participant. Now, participants are getting a lot of support from Dr. Lee and other facilitators in the program. But in NovoEd, you also have the ability to give people mentors. You can call them what you want. You can call them coaches or something else. Maybe they are instructors, or trainers. So Darren has a mentor. Her name is Andrea. She's part of the Next Up team that's helping run the Beyond Allies program. And when Andrea is logged in, she's able to see a dashboard with her mentee. So again, this could be something mentors see or facilitators see, to be able to very easily track the participants, what's their progress so far, how many to-dos have they completed, for example. And we've also just made it quick and easy for people who are mentors or anyone providing, this kind of guidance to see exactly what are the workflows, what do they need to do. So when Andrea comes to her dashboard, she could see, okay, I see 3 people need my evaluation, and I have links to be able to access their work. So these are the individual assignments that were submitted by participants like Jerry. And here's the rubric on the right side for Andrea to access. And I'm showing you a mentor doing an evaluation, but this could also be a peer completing a peer evaluation. And we can anonymize who the evaluator is and aggregate all the feedback that's coming from these evaluations for the participants. So it's easy to be able to get those key takeaways from the feedback they're getting on their action items. And the rubric also helps provide that. So here we're asking very relevant questions. These could be like your success criteria that are part of a program like Beyond Allies. Like, did they identify the main issues they're supposed to around awareness? Did they give good examples and evidence? It looks like Jerry did. He even provided some links to some articles from resources like NPR, for example, that help illustrate his point about the pay gap between men and women. And then just a final question, do you think this is a high quality suggestion? Is this something that maybe Jerry should be advised to make a bigger deal within his organization, for example, maybe present these ideas to his senior leadership team? So we've made it really easy to provide that feedback in a very guided way as well. So that's just a deeper dive into the Beyond Allies learning program. So you could see exactly how do we support that kind of very cohort-based, time-bound, social, collaborative, and experiential learning experience, when really you're trying to support these kinds of use cases where it's more effective to bring people together, have them learn together, give each other feedback, apply the learning, and also get a lot of advice and guidance from experts like facilitators and mentors. So I'm happy to hand it back to Melissa at this point.
Thank you, Juan. All right, let's see here.
I think we
Okay,
have
so with
time
that,
for some questions.
yeah, with that being said, we're at the Q&A portion of our presentation today. I know some of you have already submitted some questions. So let's see, we'll start here with Craig's question first. Are there any books, either Amberly, Dr. Lee, or Claude, that you recommend surrounding culture, resource groups, and DE&I?
I've got a couple. I can start. Obviously, there's a lot of books out there. I focus on it from an organizational perspective and as part of my research. But one that is really good is The Leader's Guide to Unconscious Bias: How to Reframe Bias, Cultivate Connections, and Create High-Performing Teams. And it's written by a couple of DEI consultants, and co-author was a high-level executive for AT&T. So that's a pretty good one. Specifically about allyship, a couple of scholars, and I can't remember what university they're associated with, but they wrote a book called Good Guys: How Men Can Be Better Allies for Women in the Workplace. And I found that useful. I was able to get a good perspective when we did our allyship research a year or so ago on some of the questions asked based on their experiences. So that's a good one. We can probably put this in the chat too. And then another one is more about inclusive leadership that I read just recently. How to be an inclusive leader, your role in creating cultures and belonging where everyone can thrive. So those are three. There are many more. There's a lot of great books out there, but those are a couple that come to mind that I've looked at recently.
If I can add to your list, anything by Brene Brown would be a good resource. And then there's this book called The EQ Edge, Emotional Intelligence and Your Success by Stephen Stein and Howard Book. And it has a lot of strategies and tips for just how to be an overall better leader, but it would also help with allyship.
Yeah, one of my favorites is The Loudest Duck by Laura Liswood. We actually had her do a workshop for us at NovoEd, and her book is a really great foundational intro into workplace diversity and how we can
We might have lost Amberly here right in the middle of her response. It looks like she froze.
Yeah.
All right, so while we wait to get her back, we can just move on.
changes here and there to make people cultures feel.
Oh, there we go. I think Amberly, I think we lost you there for a second, but I believe you're back.
Apologies. I was saying the book The Loudest Duck by Laura Liswood is a really good foundation into workplace diversity and understanding how to include people from other cultures by first understanding your own culture.
Awesome, great. All right, another question we received, can you scale DEI training? It's historically been delivered to small groups.
You can. Especially the content and engagement. For me, I think the most effective is a hybrid approach to make sure that you have some live sessions to facilitate some discussion, but you can certainly do it from a platform like NovoEd and build out the modules for the content and some different engagement metrics there.
Great, thank you, Dr. Lee. Amberly, did you want to add?
Yeah, that what Juan showed you, those smaller groups, the teams and the networking group, that's a way to preserve sort of the necessity of having, some of the smaller group discussions. So there is a way to scale it and have lots of learners, but then also break those learners down into smaller groups so that you can do those breakout activities as well.
In a platform like NovoEd, you can break into those groups, and then what I find in my personal experience, it's great is you break into those groups, then you can come back and share the perspectives of the small groups with the larger group, and it makes it very easy to go back and forth like that.
Okay, great. And then this next one, I'll combine a couple of questions that we have in here. One kind of feeds into the other. So Allison's asking, what measurement capabilities does the platform have? And what about languages? And that second question is the same. So does the platform have voice to text or the ability to switch text into one's chosen language?
Yeah, I could take this one. Is it okay if I share my screen and provide some visual aids?
Absolutely.
All right, let me go ahead and do that again. And so let's start with the language support question. Yeah, I'm back as Darren, our participant here from the demo. And every user within NovoEd has the ability to choose from 15 different languages today. It will change the language of the platform. It doesn't change the language of your content, although we are exploring that right now as part of our roadmap. The language is—
We're not sharing we're not seeing your screen yet.
Yep.
Oh, sorry about that. Let me try again. Here we
There
go.
we go.
How about now? All right.
Yep.
Great. So basically, these are the 15 languages we could support. English, Spanish for Latin America, Castilian Spanish from Spain, French from France, but also Canadian French, Portuguese from Portugal, as well as Brazilian. We also support simplified Chinese, Japanese, Korean, Russian, German, Arabic, Hebrew, Polish, and Italian as well. If there's a language here you'd like to see, but you don't, just let us know. We're constantly requesting suggestions for the roadmap. And then to get to measurements, let me show you the perspective of an admin, which you didn't get to see in the demo. So I'm logged in as an admin right now named Denise. Maybe she's part of Dr. Lee's team. As an admin, she has the ability to access analytics. So the analytics are available at the course level and at the org level. This is a course level dashboard where you could see things in real time, data like completion, progress levels. You could see, for example, for assignments, surveys, polls, other activities that we support with native tools, just out of the box with NovoEd. All that's being automatically tracked as part of our analytics here. In addition to having this dashboard available, there is also an API that you can use to pull this type of data into a business intelligence tool. Maybe you're using, for example, Power BI. Maybe you're Microsoft Shop, or you use a lot of Salesforce tools like Tableau, and that's your BI tool. So all this data can also flow into there. But we wanted to make it easy to be able to access it, but also be able to download this type of data easily into just a CSV file, so you could review it in a spreadsheet, for example.
Great. Thank you, Juan. All right. And we'll give you all just another minute or two. We're almost at the top of the hour here to submit those final questions, but we did have a couple of comments come in that I'd like to share. Melissa commented that for a book on women in leadership specifically, or more focused on gender diversity versus other types, she particularly likes How Women Rise and Work With Me. So thank you for sharing that, Melissa. And it looks like you are receiving some kudos, NovoEd and Next Up. MJ commented, I'm blown away by what you have created together. So kudos to you all. So great to see that feedback, and great to see that today's presentation resonated. All right. And so while we wait to see if we have any last minute Q&A, if you do think of something last minute that you'd like to submit and you don't quite get it into the Q&A panel, you can always email us at webinars@brandonhall.com, and we'll be sure to pass your questions along over to Amberly, Dr. Lee, Juan, and Claude. And like to thank you all for taking the time to join us today, and any last comments that anybody would like to make before we wrap up for today.
If I could just add that there were a few questions about Next Up. We are currently US and Canada based, and we are open. We have programming for all gender identities. And so, yeah, that's a little bit more about Next Up.
Okay, great. All right, if there's no other comments or anything else that any one of our panelists would like to add, again, I'd like to thank NovoEd, Next Up, And of course, Claude, for sharing the time with us today and spending the hour with our audience. Thank you to everyone in the audience for participating in today's discussion. You will be receiving a copy of the recording and a copy of the presentation within 24 hours after the conclusion of today's webinar. So if there's anything else, we look forward to seeing you on another webinar, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.